Hi everyone, and so in this video I'm going to show you a bunch of watercolor techniques. I love working with watercolor because there's so much you can do with it. First thing I'm going to show you is something called crayon resist. You can do crayon resist with any color of crayon. I love to do it with white because it's more magical that way. I'm actually going to demonstrate this technique by drawing an image and writing a word, okay? So it's kind of fun because you can write secret messages to people in white crayon. And and then they can reveal it by going over it with the watercolor. Okay, so now I'm gonna take a brush. Remember, watercolor is called watercolor because you're using lots of water. Okay, a little bit of color, lots of water. So I got a nice juicy brush. I'm gonna go ahead and get my color. And now I'm gonna go over the word and the image. Ooh, pretty. Pretty. Okay. So that is crayon resist. Believe it or not, you can do the exact same thing with white oil pastel. In fact, it even works slightly better with oil pastel because oil pastel is softer, and so it's easier to get more of it on the paper. With crayon resist, you can also roll a crayon on the side and do it that way. So it's the wax in the crayon that resists the water, and that's what makes it so that you can still see the crayon. Okay, real quick, I'm just going to show you how to do it with an oil pastel. Okay, oil pastels are softer and they have oil in them, nice and creamy. They do stain, so you got to be a little bit more careful than you would be with a crayon. Okay, and that's how it works with the oil pastel. Okay, you can also take an oil pastel just like with the crayon and roll it on its side, and it rolls a lot easier because it's softer. Okay, and then go over that with watercolor. Okay, beautiful. All right, so crayon resist, oil pastel resist. Let's move on to the next technique. I'm gonna show you how to do something called wet on wet. Put some water down. Okay, there's two different ways to do wet on wet. Put some water down, take some color, drop it in. Boom, boom, boom. It's like fireworks. Gorgeous. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, nice. Now, the other way to do wet on wet is to actually take a color, put it down, and then you take another color and you add splotches of that other color to the wet paint. Okay? Okay. So, wet on wet, very important that you have a nice juicy brush for that, okay? Because it will not work well if your brush is not nice and juicy and full of water, okay? All right, so I'm gonna just flip this so that the focus is right here. I'm going to show you guys the next technique. So next thing is called salt resist. Now, this process takes some time, okay? So you're not going to see the results right away. It's not instant gratification, okay? It takes sometimes about 10 to 15 minutes to see the crystallization from the salt, okay? But what you do is you put down the paint, you put down the salt on top of it, and then you leave it alone, okay? You don't want to touch it or try to paint over it. You leave it alone, and you the salt crystals are gonna work their magic on the paint, and you're gonna end up seeing something that looks like little tiny snowflakes from the salt. So super fun. So we're gonna let that sit and do its magic, okay? Next thing I'm gonna show you guys is working with rubbing alcohol and watercolor. Okay, so again, nice juicy brush. Got a good hair day with my brush. Okay, now rubbing alcohol, so fun. So this works best with rubbing alcohol that is 70% or more. I find that it works the best with the 90%, but when I went to the store, they didn't have the 90%. So what you do is you just take little droplets of the rubbing alcohol, and it pushes the paint away, kind of makes something that looks like a moon crater. Okay, I'll hold that up so you guys can see it. So it makes like little moon craters. All right, I'm going to show you the next technique, which is to make an ombre. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down the color, okay? And then I'm going to rinse my brush. I want a little bit more water here, and now I'm going to lay down my other color. And I'm going to meet the other color in the middle, and that's where I'm going to mix, okay, to get the ombre. Ooh, pretty. Okay, now I got my ombre. Also known as a gradient, when one color slowly mixes into the other. Now, if you just use a little bit of paint and a lot of water, you can get different degrees of color, okay? So maybe you want to do a really light blue, okay? Maybe you want an intense blue, so you're going to use more color and a little less. I mean, you're still using water because it's watercolor, but you're using more color. And then if you want like a really intense blue, you're going to make sure you get a lot of color on your brush, okay? Actually, I think this is about as intense as it's going to get here. Okay, but you can get different degrees of your color. It's called a value, okay? So darker and lighter colors, depending on how much water you use to water down the color, okay? It's also called, has to do with like opacity, something being opaque, meaning you can't really see through it, and something being more transparent, meaning you can see through it a lot. All right, let's see, what else? Did I get them all? We got the ombre, we got different values, we've got the alcohol, rubbing alcohol, it makes moon craters. Now you can actually start to see it's starting to crystallize here with the salt. It's not super intense yet, but it'll look more crystallized probably in the next 5 minutes. Wet on wet, oil pastel resist, crayon resist, wet on wet just using clear water. And I'm gonna make sure I didn't forget anything. I think that's it, guys. Okay, so happy art making, and I hope I got all the techniques, or else I'm gonna have to make this video again. All right, bye-bye.